and welcome to Around the Water Tower. I'm your host, Henry NWR, joined with, of course, Hank American Engine. But today we have a special guest as we are going to be talking about model trains, and it is TidmouthYard.
Hello.
So, before we get started with the actual podcast, we're going to do a little bit of an interview of sorts with our buddy here. And so, Tidmouth, are you ready for these questions?
Okay.
All right. Now, who is your favorite villain in the Thomas and Friends franchise?
Ooh.
And that can include Railway series as well.
The one that came to my head immediately was probably George.
George the
George
Steamer?
Yes.
Now, George is a great choice, and I know that you like him a lot as a character, just in general. Like, how come you choose George out of, like, any other character?
I think he sort of stands out because he's really the only villain that Scarlet Railway really has.
That's a good point.
Because it's all, like, very sort of ideal in the Scarlet Railway, and then you just have George. He's like the one blip.
George just comes around and everybody's like happy, like the Smurf village, and then he just comes in with his roller and just destroys everything.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of the other villains, I'm a bit sick of Diesel, if I'm honest.
Especially now because he's obsessed with ducks.
Yeah, ironically obsessed with ducks.
I think the funny thing is, though, with Diesel, they've tried to make him more relatable as a character, so that kind of took away his, I guess, villainous side. And Ari and Bert, they've literally dumbed down to being a bunch of mindless buffoons. When they came in Season 5, they were villains that made people feel terrified. I'll admit, when I watched Stepney Gets Lost for the first time, I was scared of Ari and Bert, but now...
I was terrified.
They kind of dumbed them down, and I mean, it was okay in Season 6 because they were still scheming, but they weren't hiding in shadows. And I think the only villain, per se, they haven't hit or even bothered has been George the Steamroller. And
yeah,
I'm going to have to agree with you, because it's funny to see that George is just out there to watch the world burn from the comfort of asphalt.
Yeah.
So
although, I mean... Bulgy as well, they didn't really ruin. I mean, I quite liked it in Series 7 when they brought him, because he was an asshole, but then maybe he wasn't as extreme.
Yeah. He was still condescending, but he wasn't going to extremes like trying to cause accidents. He was heckling is what it is.
It was a good progression for him. Like, you know, you could sort of see that being on the farm had reformed him a wee bit. Thought that was quite nice.
Now, did you like him appearing for that, like, minute cameo in Season 21?
Well, because that totally makes up for the Fat Controller hiding in bushes and whatnot.
Exactly.
I hate Series 21.
The
Christmas ones were okay.
See, like, the Christmas ones were, like, the saving grace of that season, but I just love roasting on that season because it was just unfinished in every single way possible. Because I genuinely still... to this day, believe that Bulgy was supposed to have, like, another episode with Season 21, so that one scene would have made more sense. But, I don't know. Big World, Big Adventures was more important than Bulgy, so...
It's more important than everything, apparently, so that's really sad.
Character development or internationalist? That's the question. We'll find out.
Tell you what shocks me, that the two new characters, Rebecca and what's the other one, Nia, is it? Yeah,
Nia.
I'm surprised it's not Ashima and Rosie.
I feel like Rosie was supposed to be. I mean, otherwise, like, I don't really see why they would go through the whole entire big ordeal of changing her colors and everything.
Yeah, like, I mean, maybe they wanted a character like that is as big as Gordon. You know,
because by the sounds of Rebecca, it really sounds like they're just it's like a mixture of Molly and Henry.
Yeah, it's Girl Henry basically going off that clip.
So, I don't know. I mean, I'm still excited that Val Britain class is coming in, but I like your idea where it's just Henry's face on a Val Britain class. So
I think I still have that line about somewhere.
It's because that's Henry rebuilt free.
Well,
he has another accident pulling the flying kipper.
I think I think we might have brought this up, but I'm not too sure. It might have been in another podcast, but I feel if they were going to just, I guess, substitute in another character for Henry, that Molly would have worked. She's bright, she's yellow, she's a tender engine, and, I mean, they've even built up a persona for her in magazine stories that she does want to be assertive, she does want to break free of being shy, and she just doesn't have that kind of confidence, and other engines gently give it to her, telling her, you can do this. I would have loved to see her instead of, like, Rebecca or even Nia. Especially Nia. Get rid of her. But I feel like Molly would have been much more interesting because, most kids would, if they liked Edward, some of the kids I've met, they like Edward because of his wheel arrangement. Molly shares that same kind of wheel arrangement, so I feel she would have been a better choice. And her class, to me, is more interesting than the Battle of Britain class, so...
Whoa.
I can't imagine many people would object to Molly coming into it, actually.
No, with the Battle of Britain class, isn't that or the Merchant Navy that has, like, the chains underneath it? Because I remember reading something where they would take the chains off of them, or whatever, underneath their wheels for, like, maintenance and stuff like that.
I'd have to look into that.
Because, I don't know. But, alright. Hank, are you ready to ask the next question?
Sure. Tidmouth, what is your favorite video that you've made? Uh-oh.
Well, they're all a wee bit haphazard.
Really? How come?
I don't know, I mean, the two that are actual, like, proper, full, edited stories, I'm not too fussed on them.
That's
I like the one I did of Series 3 Bridge Set. I like that one. And I like the For Junction one. But I could take or leave the other ones if I'm honest.
Okay. I remember how long you worked on that, like, bridge scene for that, so I'm a little surprised that didn't, like, make your number one.
It probably is, but I mean, I quite like the For Junction one because of the music I used. I thought that was quite nice.
I remember that you showed me, like, a picture or whatever of, like, the set ending and stuff on the bridge, and, like, you lost some freight cars or something like that over the side of it.
Yeah, James as well, actually.
Oh no.
Boy,
James was going to have a rebuilt too.
Are they going to streamline him is the question.
Well, have you seen that promo, the new Trackmaster Thomas?
Oh, kill me.
Really awful one.
Kill me.
They streamlined Diesel for that Trackmaster line too.
It's not an actual, like, line, is it?
It's like one of those subcategory lines, like in like the real Steam and stuff like that.
Or the glow in the dark, but
Yeah, they have like one of Thomas, Percy, and Diesel. All of them are streamlined, and they all come with like a few, I think, 2 pieces of that track that like causes them to turn into Hot Wheels cars essentially. So
see, Mattel just want to own Pixar cars, and they can't, so they're doing the next best thing.
I had heard that Mattel lost the contract to Cars here recently. Yeah, that's what I heard, but I still see them making stuff. So I'm a little surprised. I wonder if their contract terminates at like a certain time,
actually,
or what?
The only reason why you still see the stuff for Cars by Mattel on the shelves is because with the popularity of the first movie for die-casts, and I'm really bad at this, I was actually one of those fanatics that hunted down any Cars character. And the second movie the second Cars movie was okay, but it didn't do as well with the fans. And Mattel overcompensated for that, just like they overcompensated on manufacturing for the third film. Not a lot of people are really buying the toys, and Mattel, if they've lost the contract, they're just being told, you know what, stop making it, sell whatever you've got in your warehouses, and then that's it.
Oh, damn.
So
one thing I've always thought about Cars, however, I always loved like the beginning when the movies first come out.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Because like the characters they have, they're all like main characters. But like then like after a year goes on or whatever, you have like Rick the Cars fan or whatever in the background who's like some beat up Pontiac, and it's like, where was this guy in the movie? So there's just so many questions. But all right, Tidmouth, I have the next question. It's another favorite. Mm-hmm. So, what is your favorite season?
4.
Thomas and Friends.
Thomas and Friends.
Yep, 4.
Season 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 4. I thought you said 4 like question mark.
So
I was like, well, we're sort of talking about Thomas, so
Tidmouth,
Doctor Who?
If I can go on a limb here, is the reason you like season 4 because of the art direction in the episode, or is it because of just the general storytelling, or just the cast of characters that was there?
I'd say it's a combination of all of those, actually. I think series 4 is it's the epitome of quaint. Like everything just comes together and it all works. Like the narrow gauge engines, bringing them in was that was a great decision.
I feel like just bringing narrow gauge engines, and it's like really underutilized now, but I really think it helps to make the Island Sodor just look more bolder, and it's like image or whatever, because it just gives like a whole entire different terrain element.
Yeah. I know the sets for the narrow gauge engines are wonderful.
See, it's
especially
really bad.
Renee's station, I think it is.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
It's really bad because a lot of people will put season 4 on a pedestal, and I'm one of them. And the more that I hear people talking about it or sharing those behind-the-scene pictures, it just kind of pushes me closer to buying Skarloey and Renee's and just all the narrow gauge stuff that Bachmann is making. And I'm trying to steer away from that. And part of that reason...
I've got Renee's in my hand right now, actually.
Well, part of the reason why is I've watched videos of the Tallyland Railway out in Wales, and just the scenery, it's like if I could devote part of my room just to modeling something, I would model the Tallyland Railway and then just put the Skarloey Railway engines there, because it's beautiful and it's perfect. It's such a simple little line, but you would never expect it to be so breathtaking in its scenery.
Oh no, I think Wales in general is just gorgeous from what I've seen.
Oh man.
Wonderful.
Well, you're closer to Wales than I'll ever be, so let me know if you ever go.
No, I hope I do someday. It's like Tallyland Railway, that's like the ultimate place to go for Thomas fans.
It is.
Because, they have like the study of the Reverend there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, they've got his models as well. The Donald one is there.
Don't they have like all the little narrow gauge engines too, like in a glass case?
Yeah, they're in like a glass case. He's got like wee coaches and stuff for them as well.
Man, what
that guy, I feel like he was the ultimate Thomas modeler for this.
Oh yeah.
He built them from scratch too, so clearly he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
But, oh my gosh. Now Hank, you got the next question ready?
I do, and I hate to say this, Tidmouth, if you have trouble with picking favorites. We do have a couple of questions that ask you of a favorite, so my next question is, what is your favorite Railway series book?
Oh. I've got the big one here, so I'm going to have to pick one out of it.
Oh, you got the Holy Grail collection.
Be the book with Steamroller in it.
Well, let me see. I don't want to say Enterprising Engines because that's a bit generic.
That's what I like to hear. Going off the beaten track.
Yeah, I mean, Mountain Engines, that's a wee bit generic to say as well.
Debatably.
I think I would actually go with Stepney Bluebell Engine.
Okay. How come you would go with Stepney the Bluebell Engine?
I think those Stepney's episodes in Series 4, like they're the best of the standard gauge stuff there, and that book is just amazing as well.
Okay.
Like, I think Bold Out stands out. It might be my favourite story of all time, I'm not sure.
Wow.
Okay. Well, you answered the next question then, which is good. Which is your favorite episode?
I mean, it might be Bold Out, but then there's Passengers in Polish as well. That's a good one. Day for Sir Handel, that's another one.
Yes.
I think, though, I might have to go with Toad Stands By.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, because I like the fact that they actually had it's not Arlesborough, but Callan is quite a nice set.
Mm.
Mm.
And I think that's
sorry.
the best Oliver story.
Now, I do have a question about Callan Station and Arlesborough. So, that one time you made Arlesborough with like the ballast hopper and everything with Frank.
Yeah.
Was a little bit of that based off of Callan then? Like the way you had like the station to the left side, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's like that in the books as well, going off Bulgy, the pictures in that. But I always look at Callan because it just looks so nice.
Mm.
I was just wondering because like I just thought like it looked like a combination of like.
Oh yeah, it's always a combination.
That you see. So.
Yeah. I always try to take bits from both if there's a book version and a TV version.
So, Tidmouth...
sorry?
I'm going to kind of continue on with the interview. I'm sorry to interrupt, Henry. But this is a question that I guess is a personal curiosity for me. What real-life locomotives fascinate you? And, of course, this can include the Thomas and Friends locomotive bases.
Mm-hmm.
So...
well, my favorite class... by like quite a small margin would probably be the Peppercorn A1s.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I feel a bit bad not saying the A3s because I do love Flying Scotsman.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about the Peppercorn A1s. I think they're just gorgeous.
I feel like if anybody would be upset, it'd be Sandwich, because Sandwich has worked so hard to be the best locomotive ever in existence, and you just spat in his face with the mention of Peppercorn and not Gresley.
Well, where is Sandwich, by the way? Is he part of a car now, or?
He's on the table. I've been working because the room I'm building my layout in, it's like a storage room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm having to move like everything around. And so I got it like halfway where like one half of the room is clear, but the other half of the room has like all my Thomas stuff. And so I have to make sure that's how I can get to it, but it's still like out of the way of my tables.
Mm.
So Sandwich is just chilling on the layout. And the other day I went in there to mess with him, and I noticed my controller was on, and it sort of scared me because I couldn't. I was like, I honestly thought I unplugged it. Turns out I unplugged the fan, so Sandwich had been plugged in for a little bit, but he worked fine, so I guess it's okay. But I'm still scared.
So, Tidmouth, I know you were talking about the Peppercorn A1s, and forgive me for being a little ignorant or uninformed, but wasn't there an A1 by the name of Blue Peter that in '94 primed and nearly tore itself to pieces? That
was Peppercorn A2.
Oh,
they're very similar, though.
Okay.
I think they're quite similar. I think Peppercorn A2s were maybe less Premier Express engines, more mixed. I'm not too sure myself.
Okay.
I think they were more used on fast freights toward the end of their life cycles, and then why the A1s were still used on expresses until like toward the end.
Oh yeah, but Blue Peter did do that. I think it got stuck in like the one spot when it was trying to move off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was quite... I think they had to drop the fire. I'm not sure.
There's actually a video on YouTube that shows when the locomotive lost its wheels. They say that it supposedly hit 140 miles an hour. And
yes, that was extreme.
The one thing that's conflicting to me is what they say, happened to the crew inside the cab. One story states that either the driver or the fireman had both their arms broken because they tried to apply the brakes, and when they finally got them fastened, just the amount of speed and the steam pressure snapped the handle back so hard that when they held it, it snapped both their arms clean broken. And then others say that, they just had some minor injuries because trying to shut off the engine, some of the valves kind of cracked and some steam leaked into the cab. But I find this incident fascinating because a lot of people will say, like, oh, this is what Gordon the high-speed engine was based on. And, they don't really mention, the priming, which is what happened to Blue Peter.
I did not know about the arms being broken. It just... Ugh.
See, that's why, like, I'm conflicted about it, because I don't know which is the real thing. Like, the one thing they keep blaming the whole accident on was the unscheduled stop and the crew change. So... But I'll digress off of that, because I feel like I've really taken us away from the point of this interview. Sorry about that.
Oh, not at all.
Now, question: why is it the Peppercorn won out of anything? Is it like, have you seen Tornado in real life, and like when you saw it?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen any of the British engines in real life, actually.
Okay.
I've never been over there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be a wee bit shallow to say it, but I think it's just because the British Railway series, I wanted engines like that.
Okay.
And like they just look so nice.
Well,
yes, Simon does a great job with that series, and it's
I love it.
It's just really great. Like I remember getting involved in it toward the later part of the video episodes. And when I first found it, I like binged every single episode that was available.
Oh yeah.
And then I got obsessed with the book and stuff like that, and I can't wait for the second book. It's going to be amazing.
So,
but the A1 is a solid choice, though.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
But all right, I got the next question then. Would you ever consider collecting another merchandise line for Thomas and Friends?
I don't think so, because starting something from scratch, I mean, I'd rather be spending money on like ballast. Unless they brought out, like, I think there was talk of like a collector's range at one point that they were gonna do.
Oh yeah, I remember that interview on like SIF where they had like a poll or something like that about it.
Yeah, it was gonna be like sort of similar to Turtle, but maybe a wee bit more detailed. But I mean, I would have bought that. But I mean, looking at what's out at the moment, no.
So,
I don't blame you.
I was gonna say I wouldn't be surprised, because I mean, with Hornby, and especially over there in Ireland, you have more access to genuine British and European locomotives, which is usually what Thomas and Friends characters are based on. So you have more diversity, and you could even just, I guess, kind of buy a set locomotive and repaint it to look like a Thomas and Friends character.
Yeah, I've done that with a few like spare body shells I've got. I had a spare A4 that I did into Spencer, and a spare Black 5, which is Red Henry.
Nice.
Now, I do have a question with going back to like models you made. Your Thomas, I remember at one point you had to, was it the chassis went bad, and you got and you were using like a Gentis chassis, I think.
Yeah, it's back to the Thomas one at the moment. I'm still trying to find a Bachmann Genty chassis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, although I have a few Hornby 060s, so I was able to use a black one for a scene that didn't need it to be blue.
Okay.
He's a bit terrible.
Oh yes. Now, personally, I love your Thomas model, but
oh, thank you.
I still think it's one of my favorite like custom models I've ever seen personally.
It's better than Donald and Douglas.
But Donald Douglas is like your staple locomotive.
Yeah. See, everybody loves them, but I don't.
Now, I saw where you're starting to repaint the twins. Like,
yeah.
What exactly like different are you going to do to them?
I'm gonna do them the same color.
Okay.
But I'm just gonna sand them down because I tried painting them before. You can still see that there's some sort of like bumpy bits and stuff. I just want to get that all smoothed out.
Okay.
And try better lining, and I'm gonna take those red tender frames away.
Okay.
Because I don't like them as much now.
So give them like more of a working engine kind of look instead of like completely painted like Victorian feel.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get some varnish just to see if I can weather them, because the paint I'm using is a wee bit shiny.
Yeah.
I'd rather they were a bit weathered.
Because Thomas is weathered correctly, or on top a little bit, right?
it looks like that, but it's just because I think some of the glue made a wee dark bit somewhere.
Okay.
I haven't actually gone near him with a weather and powder.
Okay.
Maybe I think it's just with all that wear and tear, he just looking a wee bit tatty now.
Now, for me, I've always been scared to use weathering powder because, especially with like Hornby being so hard to find over here in the States, and just being so expensive to get over here in the first place. And I've always wanted to try my hand at weathering, especially like on a what was it, like an A4 or something like that.
Oh, I'd love to try an A4.
But it just scares me so much because what was it? I remember when I had trouble with my Gadol working for my digital controller, and I had to send it back, and that was like about 3 months of just pure agony, like trying to get the fix and not trying to void the warranty because the digital chip and the speaker would not work properly on my engine.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was not fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, I suppose if you want to start weathering, maybe try a truck. It's always good.
Okay. And what kind of weathering powders do you think would be good?
Well, the Tamiya ones are quite good.
Okay.
Yeah, they come with a wee sponge thing. It's quite good for weathering. When I'm doing like buildings and stuff, I'll use paint. It's more convenient.
Yeah.
But not for engines. You're better off using powders, because I used paints at the start and it didn't look very good.
Okay. And I saw where you finished the Farquhar station.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
It looks
and
wonderful,
that looks
by the way.
Brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
But we need to get back to these questions. So, Hank, do you want to ask the next question, or should I?
I'll go ahead and take it because I'm a little bit curious about this, because it does tie in to what Henry asked. And I want to know your thoughts about the other lines of merchandise for Thomas and Friends, aside from like Hornby and Bachmann. You know, what are your thoughts about, say, Playrail, Trackmaster, Adventures, and the current failure that people are saying is Wood?
So just all the current ones?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Pretty much.
I think anything that comes out of Japan it's gold, basically. It's just as if the early 2000s has come back.
Now, did you see the new ones that were announced today by Playrail?
Which ones were those?
Rosie, Ashima, and Caitlin.
I saw the Rosie one. Yeah. It's very hard for Playrail to screw up. Like, even the wee wind-ups, they look really nice.
Oh yeah, the wind-ups are just amazing in every little way.
Wasn't it?
Looking at. Go on ahead.
Wasn't it Thomas Fan 247 who has the Playrail versions of Bert, Rex, and Mike, and he's actually put little motors into them, so they kind of fit in his series now?
God, I'm in awe of everything he does.
Yeah, now, isn't that like T-scale too?
Yeah.
That is
like, I would not have the patience to do that. It's just, I would get upset because one wire would not go in a shell, and I would just give up. I'd be like, nope, we're done with this. Bert, you aren't running.
I just find it incredible that he took something that's mainly aimed just for a little pull-along train, and he's motorized it. He's brought it into the HOO scale world, and scale-wise, it's perfect.
Oh, they are, yeah.
It's absolutely mind-boggling.
So what were the other ones? Trackmaster then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Trackmaster, Wood, and Adventures.
I liked Trackmaster up until they sort of did the uniform chassis. Yeah, because when you've got everybody looking like a saddle tank, it just looks terrible.
Well, at least you have a better opinion of their appearance than I did.
No, I still think they're terrible.
I mean,
I'm being too nice about them.
See, when I first saw the pictures for like Gator, James, and everybody, I said they looked like tractors more than they did actual engines.
Terrence the tractor coming near to a store near you.
If only.
Yeah.
No, get Terrence with a blanket. Sorry.
Right, and then there's Adventures as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like the couplings. I think they're nice. I mean, they look cheap, but at least they seem to work. But it's the cabs and the wheels.
That is true. That's like the only things I don't like about the Adventures range, and I try to like ignore it because everybody has that like in the range now. But now you have Nia, and she has a normal sized cab.
I know.
Like, what happened
It's almost as if they're trying to make her the best one.
Like her Trackmaster model is like, I would honestly say, just by like the looks of a Toy Fair, that's a prototype too, is honestly the best model in the entire range.
Although I think her design lends itself quite well to Trackmaster.
Especially because using the tank engine body and stuff like that, like you said.
Yeah. The other thing about Adventures is, I noticed this with the Cars 3 stuff that came out. It feels like all like the paint and stuff is printed on rather than sprayed, and it feels really cheap. I've noticed that the Adventures ones look like that. It's a bit awful.
Like, that's the same thing they do with the wood. It's like they stain the paint on there, I think, instead of actually painting it.
Do they?
Yeah, it's I forget the process, but I read it somewhere where they like, apparently it's like a machine that has like the layout and stuff like that they're going to use, and they just press it against the engine like a giant stamp essentially, and then it just embodies it into the wood.
Well, speaking of wood, I think it's unforgivable because the wooden range has the most history out of all of them. You know, like with all like the different styles and stuff, and I've never actually had any of them, but like I wanted them. I wanted them for years and years. Yeah.
We should find you just like a normal Thomas, and just say happy remembrance of what could have been.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Well, all right. Now these next questions are probably going to be more around your expertise of the Hornby and Bachmann ranges. All right. So now question: what drew you into the merchandise line of 00 scale locomotives?
Well, basically, many years ago I was 3. And my dad, he had a Hornby train set when he was younger. It was a red pannier tank.
Okay.
And he brought that home just to see if I was interested in it, and I was. So for Christmas of 2002, I think it was, I got the Hornby Thomas and Percy set.
Oh.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then the year after, I was desperate for one of the big engines, so I got Gordon the year after.
Now, is that the same Gordon you still have today?
It is the same Gordon and the same Thomas and the same Percy.
Dang, that's just crazy. Because like, the good part about 00 scale engines is if you treat them right, they'll work forever. It seems like.
I mean, I was careful with them, and like some bits did break off. I mean, stuff I've been able to fix now, but I'm still quite happy that they're still here.
Now, and then I have another question relating to this same thing, essentially. What would be your personal favorite locomotives that you have in your lineup, essentially?
Well, I mean, Henry is the best one.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, even without the stuff I've done to him, he still is the best one. The Hornby Oliver is quite nice. I mean, I can't bring myself to paint the running board black on that one because it's so nice.
Please don't. Please don't.
No, I'm not going to.
I'm sure people have figured this out about me, but when Oliver returned, I was over the moon, because one thing I loved about Oliver growing up was not only, I guess, his basis, he just looked fantastic, but that white running board against all that green really helped him to stand out. And when he came back with the black running board, like, I was used to it in the books because he wasn't a very bright green. It was the Great Western Railway green, which is really kind of a dark color, but I just kind of don't like the way he looks. And the Hornby Oliver that I'm desperate to get, if I ever get the chance, it makes him look like his season 6 model. And the only fault that I can find with it, aside from the safety handrail peg going through his forehead, is his back axle. Those wheels are just black instead of the green, but no one's really going to pay attention to those wheels anyways.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to get tempted to paint it black, I'd just buy a Great Western one, because there's no point, because he's always going to be a TV series model.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no point in trying to make him railway series, because he never will be.
Especially with how rare he is now, too.
Yeah, I mean, I've weathered him quite a bit, just because of all the rivets, he lends himself quite well to weathering.
Mm.
Okay.
But he's not, like, terribly weathered.
Mm. Because, I haven't seen all of her forever, because, recently you've been taking pictures with, either Don Douglas with updates on them, or it'd be, like, Thomas, or the big engines.
Yeah, I do love the big engines.
I mean, it's pretty much the Top Gear, crew.
Yeah. Yeah, so I suppose I'd have to say I like the Hornby James as well.
Okay.
It's a lot better in person than it is in those pictures that they did with the promotional ones.
Yeah.
And so the Henry James, I assume those are older models as well that you've had for a while.
No, actually, Henry and James, I got the same time as Donald and Douglas. That would have been Christmas 2014.
Okay.
James was the stamp collection one, because it was still about at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry, I had to do a lot of looking. I finally got him for £90 pre-owned off of eBay.
Nice.
Okay.
Although I was very picky. I had to manage to get one that looked nice.
That's not a problem.
Nothing wrong with him when I got him.
Well, that's always good.
And it was the black handrail one as well, because I think the silver one looks a bit shit.
I actually never noticed that with either James, though. I didn't realize that one had silver and one had black handrails. I never noticed that.
I think the black looks better as well. Silver looks a wee bit trying, a wee bit cheap.
Okay.
One thing I've always wondered is how they reintroduced the line here recently for Hornby. With the packaging design, I can't remember if it has the styrofoam or not, because I hate the styrofoam boxes that Hornby stuff comes in.
Yeah, it's the block of ice in the new ones.
Oh, thank God. I was so worried.
Yeah, there's a few sitting in the model shop that I go to. There's an Edward which I'm very tempted by, but I know it's wrong, so I can't get it.
Because your Edward, its motor doesn't work anymore, right?
No, it died 10 months after I got him.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. I want to get a proper railway series one, maybe the Spark Shot one.
So, why do you say that buying, if anyone saying that the Hornby Edward is wrong?
It's the steam pipes and the curved running board. I think it's too unforgivable.
Okay. See,
it's just
I don't like
Edward. Sorry.
I don't like Hornby Edward. Not that I don't like the character. It's just I don't like the Hornby Edward because he's too oversized, and I know that's probably a common complaint, but he's just so massive for his.
Oh, he's very bulky.
And
yeah,
the only engine that I would say would be acceptable being bulky is Gordon, because come on, he's in the series, he's had a fat face, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it doesn't feel right for Edward, who's not the biggest tender engine, to be made so massive that he makes Gordon look small.
Yeah, it's sort of they got the length right, but he's just too wide. So if you look at something like the T9, that's quite long, but it's also quite thin.
One thing I absolutely love, that year Edward came out, I think Emily came out as well.
Oh, God.
So you have two terrible models, and then you have, all the circus stuff that came out, too. And the circus stuff is actually, one of the highest rated, rolling stock collections, ever to be made for Thomas and Friends.
God, I don't know why they put so much into that.
I don't know either. I remember for Christmas getting it because, what was it? Because when used to, Hornby never sold anything over here in the U.S. It was just, so difficult to find it because you'd have to go on ebay.co.uk to find anything, really. And my family found some of them used that were in good condition, and so they got it for me for Christmas. and they got everything together for like a really good price. So I have all the circus stuff. Like, it was like so random because at the time I didn't have any Hornby stuff except for Duck, which I like saved up my allowance for weeks to get.
Oh, Duck was the thing everybody got back in the day.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I told my parents when I found it on eBay, I said, "This is the one train that shows that I am a true Thomas and Friends fan."
God, people are gonna hate me then.
So I ordered Duck, and then I had the circus collection, and everything else was Bachmann. So it's a little off-putting. But Hank, you got the next question for us, or is it me?
I think it's me, and I think this actually rounds up the end of the interview. You did touch up on this earlier, but why did you choose to collect this particular range of merchandise? I know you were talking about how your father brought home that set, and it kind of just grew on you, but is there any particular reason other than that?
After I got Gordon, which was about 2003, I didn't really get anything else after that.
Okay.
So, like, I got, I think, the turntable and the cattle truck, but that was about it, because I think the Urtles were just about ending, so I was still collecting those. And then Take Along came out, and I was big into Take Along. So it wasn't until about 2009 when I got my first computer, and I went on YouTube, and I found out that Bachmann existed. And I felt very betrayed, because the Hornby, Gordon and Henry, the tenders were so wrong compared to the Bachmann ones. Because I had no idea they were based off the real engines. I always thought, oh, they're just a wee bit off compared to the TV ones.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got the Bachmann Edward in 2009 and sort of started me on Hornby and Bachmann stuff again.
Okay.
All right. Now,
it was just seeing them online. I wanted them even more.
Now, question with, like, because I know you've told me, and you sort of mentioned it a little bit, like how you've had Ertl and stuff like that. So for, like, I remember you telling me you had the Viaduct set that came out, like, right at the end of the lifespan of Ertl.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, in your collection of Ertl stuff, did you have a bunch of, like, the new couplings that came out right at the end?
Oh, yeah, I've quite a few with those, yeah.
Okay. Because I don't know why I find those to be like the most interesting things, because I have like Jock and like Spencer to have those. But it was weird because like I remember they made Musical Thomas at the same time.
Yeah, I never got that one.
Okay. I got that toy store that I had a website for in the UK back in the day when it was like when Ertl was still a thing. And I ordered those with Jock and everything, and it came in the exact same style packaging and everything, but the couplings were the same as the old Thomas.
Probably saved a wee money there.
I was just so confused, though. Like, is that, like, a prominent thing toward the end of it?
Oh, yeah, no, it got very prominent, and I think it was the style of packaging.
Okay.
They were hanging about, because obviously we had Ertl lying about till about 2005, I think it must have been.
Okay.
So, I mean, I didn't really faze me that they changed the couplings, because, I mean, they worked a bit better. The only thing that was wrong was that it just made coaches go the wrong way.
And that was, like, a huge, like, annoyance of mine. It's, like, I love the new coupling system, but, like, since all my rolling stock and everything was the older style, it didn't really work as well, and so it was a little frustrating, because I couldn't find any of those pieces growing up.
Yeah.
And then the website shut down or whatever, and they sold all their Ertl stuff like ridiculously quickly. Like as soon as they said Ertl wasn't going to be made anymore, like the next month they were completely wiped out.
Oh, and the sad thing of that is they were going to make Mike as well.
Were they really?
They were going to make a Mike, yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
And of course then Take Along made him.
I am deeply frustrated now. Like, honestly, I sort of want to write a letter to Ertl and be like, I don't know who y'all think you are, but withholding a mic is like withholding a national treasure.
Is Mike like the holy grail of the Smallies? Honestly.
Absolutely, because Mike tells off everybody, and it's amazing. because he's not like the cookie cutter friend engine and stuff like that. If he doesn't like you, he just straight up tells you no.
I think the funny thing about Mike is I was watching season 20 downstairs on my TV, and one of my older brothers who used to watch Thomas as a kid came downstairs, and he just saw Mike grumbling about Mr. Fergus Duncan telling him that he would take passengers. And my brother looks at me and he's like, what the hell is that little dude's problem? Because, you know, when Mike, he complains about the passengers, he whistles angrily at Rex. And my brother said, he is the angriest character I have ever seen in the show. And I don't know if that's just like Mike's calling card that makes him like the holy grail for the small railway engines, but he's been in almost every single merchandising line, bar Ertl, since he was introduced in Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like we need to have a movie where Mike is the villain now, and I feel like everything will be complete.
For crying out loud, Mike could be a villain and not even mean to be the villain. It's just he's not as blunt or plain speaking as Duncan, but he's just so angry. Why is he always angry? He's
friends with Railway Series Henry. That's essentially this.
True.
Real Henry.
True. Well,
fake news Henry in the modern day.
Since we have kind of been touching up on Ertl, one thing I do know is that people use Ertl in their Bachmann and Hornby videos, and I'm sure you've done that as well, Tidmouth. So
yeah.
Just kind of, where do you stand with both Bachmann and Hornby, just in the way they produce the Thomas and Friends merchandise?
Well, I mean, at the moment, Bachmann it's more impressive. I mean, the 2018 announcements were shite, but if you look at they're doing a lot more than Hornby have been. So I think the comparison ends at about 2012. Because I know Hornby had trouble not shifting the Olympic stuff they did, and that sort of like meant they had to slow down with the Thomas stuff.
Because ever since the Olympics and stuff like that, that's what caused Hornby to think that they might go bankrupt, or not go bankrupt, but they were bankrupt and might go out of business.
Yeah.
Because weren't they in charge of all the like souvenir stuff for the Olympics?
Yeah, because they own Corgi as well, and Corgi made a shit ton of wee cars and stuff.
Okay, because I remember they made the HST Olympic set, and then I remember they had a few cars and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, they put a lot into it when they shouldn't have.
So, I guess something that I'm probably a little bit ignorant about, because I don't really invest a lot into HOO scale, is that the main differences between Bachmann and Hornby is that Hornby replicates the TV series, whereas, I mean, Bachmann replicates the TV series that kids see, whereas Hornby went in the more realistic, trying to go to the railway series. Do you think that is probably something that does affect the popularity between both ranges?
I think in the fan base. Yeah,
or just
I think
in general, probably.
I'm not sure Hornby could ever afford to make like fully accurate models. I think it's just like, oh, you want us to make these models? Oh, we'll just do this as a wee thing on the side. Oh, this looks like this. We'll use this. I think in the 1980s it certainly worked, because I think Brett Allcroft insisted they make a Percy. So they had to make Percy. Thomas, I think they just about got away with the E2 because that's what the Reverend used. And then Gordon and Duck and Diesel, they were quite good. And then James came out just after, which also was the Reverend's method. So I think for the 1980s, they're very impressive.
Now, one thing you and me have talked about on Tidmouth is that, like, with Hornby, they never seem to choose, like, a constant face color.
Oh, God, yeah.
And Henry's, like, the only one that's, like, actually accurate to what you see.
Yeah, Henry is spot on. They tried with Gordon and Duck, and it is just too dark.
Yeah, I was about to say, because, like, Duck, in comparison to every single other engine I own, is, like, night and day difference. Like, you don't realize it, like, seeing it, like, on the internet and stuff like that, but, like, when you have them side by side, it's just crazy, like, how that got passed.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, Bachmann's are all luminous white.
Especially with Paxton.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I like. Is the face like? The faceplate hasn't like the bit around it hasn't been painted, but is the face actually? Because it's still a square within that.
No,
they fixed it.
Bachmann fixed it because what it was actually was just a promotional picture, and I'm actually gonna be the devil's advocate that if Bachmann did have this promotional picture and they were trying to get everything to look like Paxton, but if they use a computer to just kind of like put the face mask into it, since it's just a basic diesel model with a repaint and a different face mask, the computer was probably trying to make all of Paxton that one green color, so they just said, do a little Photoshop and put the face on there. So if the faceplate itself is that big chunky white bit, I'm gonna side with Bachmann and say, people, calm down. It was just a promo picture, and I'm sure Bachmann would not let something that horrendous go to anyone as a product when they're going to immediately compare it to what they see in the TV. Now,
see, the thing I thought about when that was shown is like the exact same thing that happened when Mavis was first shown. She was gray. Yeah, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, Mavis is wrong!" And it's like, guys, like, when have they horribly disappointed us? Not including Thomas and Percy and James's face, but otherwise, when have they disappointed us? Never.
With Oliver.
I was quite happy with Oliver, except for his axles in the back.
Yeah, no, like, that bit of him's terrible.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, and I was like, where did we look at this and be like, oh yes, this is brilliant? That's like Jeremy Clarkson just putting like steel on the side of his car to make it wider or whatever with a hammer.
So, I guess since we are talking about Bachmann, and you did mention it earlier that the 2018 release of stuff was really weak, one thing that has really just kind of pushed me over the edge of just saying this is not really acceptable is they're reintroducing the express coaches in both the green and the red and cream, which it's probably long been overdue, but the fact that they're making an angry diesel and they're charging 3 figures for a faceplate, when personally I've seen a lot of people say, you know what, they're going to make parts available, his face will be available, I'll just order the face and spend like $15 to get it, rather than a full 100 plus to buy the engine. Do you think they should have released someone else, a tank engine or someone, instead of an angry diesel?
Yeah, well, like, it's an incredible lack of foresight on their part, like, because people are just going to buy the faceplate. Yeah.
They don't make the truck faceplates available, do they?
They don't.
I don't know. No, I suppose it's just engines, but
it's upsetting.
I think they maybe should have made somebody like Philip, maybe.
Oh, hell no.
I want a Bachmann Philip. I want a Bachmann Charlie. Charlie's top of my list.
I'm fine
now,
about
how come Charlie out of anybody?
Everybody hates Charlie. And I like Charlie.
Okay.
I was about to say, you're pretty much listing like all the characters you just mentioned are all the characters Hank hates.
I'm actually
like, with a passion.
I'm actually going to say this.
Philip in front of him, he's gone on like a 5-minute rant on why he doesn't like Philip, and I learned more words during that in the English dictionary than I did before.
So I'm actually going to say this. I dislike Charlie when they introduced him because they tried so hard to force him to be funny. You know, they still try to now, but one thing that I will say is in season 18, he kind of touched off a good note with me, because if it weren't for him, we would not have had that amazing, fun episode that is Not So Slow Coaches. Yes,
that's a good one.
His jokes, they're not good, they're not terrible, because I've heard absolutely worse puns and bad puns, but the fact that he's an interesting locomotive, he's better a character than Billy ever was. So,
yeah.
And I kind of...
we have jokes ahead of us in Big World, Big Adventures with elephants, apparently.
Oh, kill me. But
anyway, like, I think the real top of my Bachmann list is Peter Sam.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah.
And I was very annoyed that there wasn't a new narrow gauge engine.
Well,
so you make your own?
Yep. Yeah, my own.
I mean, like I said, that's kind of the amazing thing for you is that you have access to those kits to where you can just make your own characters. But one thing that I feel Bachmann has done extremely well with has been their the Skarloey Railway engine. I see videos about Skarloey and Renius, and I keep getting pushed to buying them because Skarloey looks just like Tally Lynn, but with the face and the paint to make him Skarloey. And barring the couplings that they used, he looks fantastic. They all look fantastic. And I'm kind of excited to see what Rusty looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm worried about with Rusty is how big the face is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's terribly big, there's one on Shapeways, and the chassis for it's about £20, so I'll probably just make my own if it's that bad.
But
there's a lot of stuff on Shapeways.
There is.
Now, I don't have Rheneas, but from seeing the pictures you do, I feel like you could be like the Rheneas like spokesperson for Bachmann. With like because you have a little bit of 009 scale track, correct?
I have one bit of track. It's a really long bit, but it's like flexi track. But yeah, I mean, I can get away with it for now.
So for when you have like Crovin's Gate or whatever, you can have Rheneas pop up and then go toward the end of the line and just roll off like James.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a bit more track because I do want to do the sheds actually.
Okay.
So
that'd be really cool.
Would you replicate the sheds from season 4?
Oh, I'm still thinking about it because I like the raised bit in the Railway series. But then the series is too nice not to do.
See, that's something I think, and we did talk about this earlier in the interview, is that with the Skarloey Railway now being made into N scale, as according to Bachmann, or is it HON3? I forget, but it runs on N scale track. It does allow you to have the opportunity to replicate what you see in the Railway series, what you've seen in season 4, or even if you go out to Wales and you, however the hell you do it, you can get high quality pictures of the Tallylyn Railway, and you can replicate that. I feel like
it's opened up so much now that they've done the narrow gauge stuff.
And I feel like it was a stellar move on them because they've released 2 box cars. I'll call it a bolster wagon because it does look like it, and then 3 different slate cars, and now they've announced coaches.
I am excited for the coaches. I'm not gonna lie.
That's where I'm terrified because if the coaches, and I'm sorry to cut in, if the coaches are like what we see in season 3, all 3 of those colored coaches, the green and cream, the red, and the blue and cream, and then they announce, say next year or later on down the line, that they're going to do the coaches from the CGI series, which I believe are based off of the ones on the Tallylyn Railway.
They are, yeah.
That's probably going to push me to cave and then just like binge on so much for those little engines and all that rolling stock because they're so gorgeous. They're wonderfully made.
Oh no, Rheneas it's the best thing Bachmann's made. I heard something that Bachmann UK had a hand in it as well, which is why he's got a cream cab and a handrail.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah, because Bachmann obviously don't normally do detail like that.
Because I remember reading up on when Skarloey came out, and I ordered mine back in January, February after he came out, and I didn't get mine until 6 months later. Because they had sold out, and I feel like they're still having trouble, from what I've heard, with like keeping them in stock. Because like with this was the biggest gamble they had ever done in the range, because people have been asking for years for them to do it. And they're like, no, I don't think it's going to sell well. And then they just tried out Skarloey, and Skarloey was their best-selling model of, I think, what year it came out? 2015, 2016?
Yeah.
So, needless to say, I feel like Bachmann thinks it's a wise investment to invest into the narrow gauge line.
Especially since they're based off the Tally Flynn, because the amount of modelers that have bought these up and converted them.
I wouldn't be surprised if, like, eventually, once they made every engine, if they went back and like redid them like for the branch or Bachmann branch lines UK.
See, I asked Luke Ryan about that, and he told me that Bachmann got into a lot of trouble when they did those Thomas and Percy repaints.
Oh, really?
For the junior range, yeah, because it was meant those molds were specifically just to be used for the Thomas range. I think they got into a wee bit of trouble.
Mm.
Oh, okay. I could see that, like, why it takes so long to make models, because like a lot of people looking into it, like especially when we had the model series. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted Arthur to be made, and everybody's like, well, why can't you just use the LMS model that they had, because they had a 262 Form T.
Yeah.
At the time, and like everybody was just like, why can't you just take that, and you can even take out some of the details, so that would be cheaper.
Yeah, then I suppose Bachmann do like to keep the range like uniform in that way. Like everything has to have the same sort of style of like running board and couplings and buffers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing about Bachmann is a lot of people will praise them for just kind of the accuracy, since they follow the TV series. I don't have my hands on Donald and Douglas yet, but a lot of people have been saying that when Donald and Douglas were made, that Bachmann filled a huge gap in the market, in that these models of the twins were ridiculously popular. Do you think that Bachmann has been doing kind of a good job going for characters that sometimes the fans want, like Donald and Douglas, Duck, Oliver and Toad, and things like that?
Yeah, definitely, because we're going to buy them, at the end of the day. Mm. It's Donald and Douglas.
Well, I feel like when you look at Bachmann's range and stuff like that, you mainly look at it as the ultimate fan service in the series, and the reason why I say that is because the range essentially revolves around the fans, because not a lot of the younger viewers and stuff like that they try to aim the show for, especially with Mattel, with Wood and Adventures and everything. They don't like buy Bachmann, because what parent is going to go out and spend $100 on an angry diesel? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
it's the same with Scarloy, though, because I mean, what parent is going to buy that for their child when it's for the fans, basically?
Like $150 for another scale of locomotive.
That was 2015. That was like the anniversary year, and that's the best year of being a Thomas fan, if I'm honest. And, it was quite nice of them to do it.
It was.
Now, I remember when Celebration Thomas came out, I thought he was going to be limited edition, and I'm a little disappointed.
There's going to be actual like molded flags on them as well.
It's cool, like it's something different, and I really like the metallic paintwork on them. But at the same time, I sort of wish that we just got an LBSC Thomas.
Yeah, I thought Hornby were going to do that when they brought the range back. I thought we were going to get a green Thomas and a black James.
That would have been amazing. Now, another question I have to ask you, since you actually have both versions of these. So with Hornby doesn't like to switch tooling for Thomas at all, even if they have this stuff available. Hint, Gordon and Flying Scotsman. But so what do you think works better for Thomas and Friends? Do you think the tender-driven locomotives are good, or do you think that they should all be motor-driven, like normal?
Well, I mean, motor-driven, it's always best.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a bit of trouble with the Hornby Gordon and one of my A4s as well, which is tender-driven. Sometimes the wheels can lock up or rods can fall out of place, and it can be very frustrating. But Henry and James, I suppose my Henry and James are relatively new, so I haven't really got any problems with them.
Okay.
And the tender drive motor, when it's new, it's damn good as well. But I think my Hornby Bear, which has the same motor as the tender driven engines, is starting to suffer a wee bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, something that I'm sorry to interrupt both of you since we're on Hornby. Something that I've heard on Twitter is that some of the Hornby Thomas and Friends locomotives are now being equipped with ECC chips, and given that some people may or may not understand what that is, DCC kind of allows everyone to operate multiple engines from one throttle. And I guess kind of just tying it back to the show, since there's always multiple engines, do you think that's a good move from Hornby to put DCC chips in engines like Gordon, Henry, Edward, and James for the fans, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it is, because I mean the tender drive logos before were, I know, especially hard to chip. But I think now that they've put something in the tender where you can just like plug the chip in and away you go. So I think that's quite a good move, because I know I was frustrated when I was younger. I couldn't run two engines on the same line because I had Thomas and Percy, and since Percy was the Hornby 40, it would always catch up with Thomas on the other side.
Because I remember Spencer, when he came out, it was a big deal because he was DCC ready, because they just use the A4.
Yes, the railroad A4, yeah.
And like everybody was wanting Gordon, James, and Henry to have the same features and stuff like that. Yeah,
I think Henry, the new Henry, is loco driven.
Really?
Yeah, although it's quite weak because the tender's so heavy, because they just left the mechanism in it for the tender drive.
It's just lazy.
Yeah, no, the Hornby Railroad Flying Scotsman that I have, it had the whole like metal block in the tender.
Huh. Now, one thing I don't like about the newer Hornby engines, and this is like from when they redid the range in 2015, is that all the tender engines, like on their chassis, is like the same color as their body. So you'll have like Henry's chassis being like a bright green, same thing with Gordon being like bright blue, and James, and it's just like, now I had to paint that.
Yeah, they've always been like that though.
But still, I don't know. It just it's like
James has always, you know what I mean? James has always had the black chassis.
Okay, I did not. I just thought it was all three of them had it.
No, it's just Gordon and Henry, and it does look awful. That's like the one thing that would put me off the Hornby Henry.
Now, did you repaint yours?
Yes.
Your Henry? Okay. Because I was like trying to think. Because I was like, I've never seen that on yours, but I was like, maybe I'm just missing it because I just remember the happy face in the pile of sand after the points.
So
yeah, I think I had those painted before I joined Twitter.
Okay.
So Tidmouth, I've actually got a question, and this is something that has just kind of crossed my mind, being an extreme novice into HOOO scale. I know that there is a website in Britain where you can buy genuine coupling conversion kits, so you can get rid of like the hook and eye couplings on all your British ends in stock and replace them with genuine 3-links or screw links to have a more realistic operation. And I believe it's a Twitter user by the name of Sudrian Railway Modeler. Who's garnered a lot of attention, and he's actually been doing that with all of his engines. What do you think about that? Is that kind of like the biggest stepping stone for Hornby and Bachmann, is that you can buy these kits, you can install them and remove the bulky hook and eye couplings and be closer, I guess, to replicating the TV series? Do you think that's really kind of like the biggest pinnacle for both ranges as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do that at some stage. I mean, the only thing that would frustrate me is that if you don't have like a large enough distance between buffers, they will catch on tighter curves. Because I think it's why what is it? Isn't it the Chorus Railway that Sir Hayden and Edward Thomas come from? I think it is. Could be right. I remember that they were used in a factory at one point too, and that was carried over to the railway series. Yeah, so like they didn't have buffers because the curves were too tight. So I think you'd have to have, if you were going to convert to proper hooks, you'd have to have really gentle, realistic curves. But I mean, I'd love to try it someday. Did you all? This is really random, but did you all see where Mighty Max Bases in real life has retired? Yeah, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, that's sad. Especially because I remember watching a documentary where they're talking about Flying Scotsman being preserved, and they had the interview with I forget who owned it. It was either the first owner or the owner that just passed away recently. I think if it's Festiniog, it probably would have been Alan Pegler. Okay. I know he had a hand in the Festiniog Railway. Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
because they had an interview with his daughter on the Mighty Max basis and stuff like that. And I just found it cool because you never hear about that line in comparison to like the Tally Flynn, for example.
Yeah, is this the Flying Scotsman documentary that's just come out? By any chance?
It could have been. I just remember I saw on YouTube, and it was supposed to be like a BBC or ITV documentary.
All right, because there was one on recently where they were interviewing her on Festiniog.
Okay, that could have been it then.
So,
but it's a shame for that engine.
And have you heard about Union of South Africa as well?
They're retiring that A4?
No.
Yeah, they're retiring Union of South Africa.
Now, are they retiring both engines because they need their, routine maintenance, or is it permanent retirement, like they're going to be static?
Static.
Oh my gosh, why are they...
Yeah, so we're losing the double Fairlight and we're losing the A4.
See...
And so the only A4 in steam then is Britain, I can never pronounce his name.
Bittern,
yep. And Sir Nigel Gresley then.
Yeah.
See, for me, it doesn't really make sense because in, 2013, that was the 75th anniversary of the Mallard speed record. And, fast forward about 25 years, it's going to be 100 years of that amazing record. What are they going to do for that if they if they retire the other two, It'd be...
Oh, I hope they don't.
It'd be frankly, it'd be a damn shame because you've only got 6 left in the world. Mallard is at the National Railway Museum, and I don't know if they have plans to bring her back to life. Dwight D. Eisenhower.
They're not doing that.
Mallard's too popular as a static exhibit to ever warrant steaming again, I think.
Yeah.
And then with like Union of South Africa, if I remember correctly, I think the people that own it, because I think it's a boiler certificate or certification that's going out.
Mm-hmm.
And normally to get that, they had to go into overhaul for a long time. This is what's happening with Sir Hayden now. Yeah. And it's just so expensive, especially on mainline engines, especially the express engines.
Yeah.
And I feel like if anyone would need to keep it alive would be Sir Nigel Gresley on the Seven Valleys. Or I think it's Seven Valleys. Or no, North Yorkshire Moors. I'm sorry.
That's where it hangs out at, yeah.
And because that's like their star attraction. So if they got rid of the like number one profit making steam locomotive, that would not be a good thing. Yeah. So I feel like if any of them, it'd be that one to get repairs. But it's like what's the 7MT Clan locomotive that's going that's having its boiler certificate coming up in August, I think, and that one's going in for maintenance for it, and it's going to be out for like 2 or 3 years because of it. Number 70,000.
I think it's easier for Heritage Railways to get around that. Whereas I think Union of South Africa, it's private owned.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're a wee bit of a money pit when they're private owned.
Mm-hmm. Because I couldn't remember if it was private owned or if it was part of the National Collection.
Yeah. Then I suppose Bittern is like, it's the gimmick A4. Because like,
remember
how many liveries has it had?
I remember it had the BR late, and then also had the LNER Garter Blue.
Then it's had Garter Blue without valances. It's been Silver Link. It's been Dominion of New Zealand.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then remember when Hornby made that special pack where it had its water tender?
I wanted that so much.
Same here. Always saw that and like I envied it, and I always thought like for me growing up, or like a few years ago, it wasn't until recently I realized that once Hornby stops making stuff, they never make it again. And so I always thought, I was like, well, this doesn't say limited edition, so it'll be here for a while. It was not there for a while, I'll tell you that.
Please don't, because I've been on eBay because I love Flying Scotsman, and I've come across a pack that has Scotsman with its 2 water tenders, and and I'm desperate to get my hands on that one because I grew up with the Railway series, and I've been following Scotsman ever since I'd heard before it was brought back to steam, like, oh, it's been pushed back because of this. And the one thing I was like is, I want to have a model of Scotsman before it returns to Steam. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm an advocate for or against the changes it's had over the years, but I love the double tender concept, the two tenders, because the two corridors behind the engine, for me, it feels natural. And to see it with just its single corridor tender, it's a little bit off-putting, because I'm used to seeing the A4s with the single corridor tender and even Tornado, but not Scotsman.
Yeah, I feel like I'd like Burton to give Flying Scotsman its tender back.
Hank, I feel like for you, since you like American locomotives so much, I feel like it gives a more Union Pacific vibe with the double tenders.
Well, I'm not going to say that's essentially fair, because the tenders that Union Pacific puts behind its engines, they're both there for water and fuel. The second auxiliary tender for Scotsman was for just water. And, I have nothing against it, but like I said, it just feels right, because if you come over to the US and you see like the 844 with both water tenders, in all technicality, it's a 3-tender locomotive.
Jeez.
So,
in America with trains, if there's anything worth overdoing, it's done.
I mean, you can say that in May of next year, because the big boy is slated to be under its own steam in the May of next year. I believe roughly exactly 60 years since it was retired in 59. And I'm actually kind of scared about seeing it. Like, I'm over the moon and overjoyed because it's a fascinating locomotive, but at the same time, that's well over 1 million pounds of steel thundering down the line. It's enough to shake you off your feet. Just the engine itself.
I'm just wondering if that's going to cause the 611 prices to drop, because that'd be nice.
Oh, hell. If anything, I expect prices to either go up or for the 611 to become irrelevant.
Because the 611 prices right now, it's like $400 a ticket to ride on the train for like 2 hours.
In the 90s, you paid $80 for a round trip behind a steam engine. What happened?
Tidmouth, I thought of something very funny. I feel like you would absolutely love to do.
Yeah.
So, alright, so you have an A4.
Yeah.
So, if you get like a post-it note and put it on the side of the nameplate, just put, bitter or whatever. I feel like essentially you have every A4 that has ever been made. We need to try this for science. This has to be done. Oh my gosh. Also, in case y'all don't realize, TidmouthYard, he has a Twitter, and needless to say, he posts, of course he posts updates on his layouts and stuff like that, and that's always great to see. However, he does post some great memes of his locomotives, and that is the highlight of my day. For example, when you see a picture of Gordon saying "yus," it just brightens my day so much.
Oh, thank you.
So, one thing I will actually say, and we have talked about it, is I believe a couple of months ago you posted a few pictures of your weathered Oliver and Duck models, and they were just kind of on regular goods duties. I think I've actually saved those pictures, and I have them in a folder just dedicated to Oliver. But one thing that I am curious about is, are you ever interested in picking up like a Hatton's exclusive locomotive? Because I mentioned before the podcast, I have 2 of the 1400 class, and I'm absolutely just enamored with them. I even bought a second one just to either carefully disassemble and repaint to be Oliver from the TV series myself, white running board and all, and the other one is just for me to keep because it is such a fantastic model. Have you ever considered buying a Hatton's exclusive locomotive, Tidmouth?
I mean, I've had my eye on the 14XX.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although I mean, I was sort of planning to do Escape at some point. So I'd like a black one, although I was thinking of maybe just getting like a cheap Airfix one and just spray it black and make it sort of look like the Titfield 14XX.
The thing I like is the one Hank has. They did I don't know if he did a video on it, but I've seen the clip of it, and it's the exact same livery and everything with the cycling lion, and it's in the dark green that Oliver was rescued in. And they make that model, and that's the one my eye is on, and I think it's like 99 pounds.
It's 99 pounds for DC operations. You can also get it with the DCC chip installed, and there's also an additional option for DCC and sound in there. So
I think I would love to get one of those. I mean, it's better than what Hornby have done. Did you see they introduced the old 14XX into the railroad range?
Is that what, the one that Sam's Trains had on his YouTube channel here?
Probably. And they've released it with the original chassis, but without the traction tires.
Oh no!
And without the wee springy wheels at the back. So the middle wheels don't do anything.
That's
they're hovering in the air.
So, to be honest, I actually have two different ones from Hatton's. The one that I believe I featured in my Bachmann Oliver and Toad review is the Great Western Railway unlining with the Great Western Railway lettering. And then the second one that I got as a birthday gift to myself is the BR lined green with the early R Railway emblem. So it's bad for me to say this because the BR lined one is the one I bought because it represents Oliver from the TV series the most with that added dome. I'm thinking about buying one so I can keep the two I have currently the way they are and then to repaint the third one. Just because, like you've said, they're handsome models, and I really... It feels like a shameless plug that I keep praising Hatton's for this, but the fact that I pull it out of the plastic and I set it on the tracks, and I'm kind of doing a double take myself, like I know it's a model engine, but if I did like a small bit of weathering and tossed in a crew and did that coupling conversion, who's to say it's not the real thing?
Yeah.
You could always send it to Olivia's train and get that firebox glow installed too in your lamps.
Oi.
We'll probably have we need to have a link in the description to haddons.com at the end of this.
Oops.
Shameless plug, not even gonna lie. Like, if I was sponsored, that would mean every single video. I'd be like, alright guys, we going to haddons.com. We about to get the best deals.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I've noticed is just kind of the accessibility that they have. They have a lot of rolling stock, and I mean, it's always in great condition. I've bought a couple of times from them, but like I said, I'm leaning more towards buying another locomotive. And I'm actually going to ask you this, Tidmouth, because I think there was a company that announced that they were going to do the Caledonian 812 class that Donald and Douglas are based on. I don't know what liveries they're going to make, but I'm praying that they do the Caledonian Railway Blue.
They are doing, I think they're doing a few liveries. They're doing the blue, the preservation blue. I think they might be doing some sort of blue from the time, and then they're doing BR black, a few of those as well.
Because I remember BR black, they're doing early and I think late. And I think they're doing 812 as Caledonian blue. And then the other ones are like other engines of the class. Yeah.
I'm really hoping that nobody gets them to do Donald and Douglas.
I got you, don't worry. With my modeling skills.
Because then, I mean, I would lose I'd lose my appeal. And also, I wouldn't want to see models like that turn into Thomas characters.
Well, I think the funny thing is for me, you know, as beautiful as the Caledonian Railway Blue is, I love the Bachmann Donald and Douglas better just because they, for me, feel what Donald and Douglas has always been for me growing up. And if I was to buy one of those 812s, it would probably be the Preservation Caledonian Railway Blue, because it stands out to me that it's a magnificent blue. It makes the engine pop when it's pulling the carriages, and the fact that after so many years a company is saying, hey, we're going to manufacture this class of locomotive, I'm going to actually agree with you, Tidmouth. It's kind of scary thinking that someone might just buy it to make Donald and Douglas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure many people could afford to get two of them to do that with, but if anybody does, I'd really hope they use an airbrush.
If I ever get one, Tidmouth, I would tag you in the post, and I would just put Donald's face on it. Just to aggravate people. And people, there's going to be one person that's going to comment, you made a custom Audi 812? And I'll be like, absolutely. That is exactly what I did right there.
I'll make sure to do that for you, because
thank you.
I probably will end up buying one of them, because the class itself fascinates me. I mean, if I want Donald and Douglas, I have Bachmann for it. But just, I'm curious to see how far the detailing will go. How far will they go to make it as realistic or as accurate as possible?
Well, it's Bachmann Branchline that's doing it for that website.
Really?
Oh, it is? I thought it was like Oxford or something for some reason.
No, and if it's anything like, did you see the C-Class they did?
Yes, that's amazing.
I reckon it'll be on the same level as that.
Oh no, it's essentially going to be 200 pounds by the end of it.
It'll be like, the C1 Atlantic.
Yeah.
It'll probably end up priced like that.
Oh man.
I saw where because Rails of Sheffield, it's like an exclusive to them, correct?
Yeah.
Because they said you can pre-order it now, and if it was like over 160 pounds, you could cancel like your pre-order or something like that. Because
I dare say
they don't know the price. Yeah. Now, needless to say, when I go buy new engines, however, I have to consult Sandwich, because Sandwich doesn't want like Great Western locomotives on the line. That's why the 14XX hasn't shown up. And I feel like that's the main reason why he's been the last engine I got recently for my double scale range, is because he wants me to know that he is the best. And I already knew that. But I feel like he just wants it to cement in my mind that, like, hey, I am the best you will ever get. And I'm like, Sandwich, thank you so much for letting me know.
So
yeah, you shouldn't tangle with God.
I'm just gonna ask one more question before we wrap up this podcast, Tidmouth. From the big four, the LNER, the LMS, SR, and GWR, which is your favorite railway?
The LNER.
Thank you.
There's two ways of doing things: the Great Western Way and the wrong way.
That's where you're wrong. It's either the LNER or the not right way.
But I guess we have talked a lot about Bachmann and Hornby, and it's been great to get. I'm going to call you an expert, Tidmouth, because, like I said, I'm an extreme novice. It's been wonderful to get an expert's point of view between the both of them, where they have their strengths and they have their weaknesses. And I'm actually looking forward to kind of seeing what more both Bachmann and Hornby have for the fans as time goes on.
I think Hornby are wrapping up the range now. Yeah.
I feel like they might make an angry Thomas and then not quit.
Well, I think the thing with Hornby is Bachmann did try to get the UK license a while back, and Hornby sort of said, oh no, we're keeping it. But I'm not sure they'll be keeping it for much longer.
Because it's just like an extra expenditure at this point.
Yeah, like, I love Hornby, and like I'll defend them to the death, but I want Bachmann to get the license now.
And then maybe we can get Red Rosie eventually. I would love to have that.
Oh.
It would have been a lot better than Angry Diesel, because Angry Diesel would have been good when it first released, but now people are upset and they're offended, and I don't know how you get offended by that, but it's just a bad decision. But either way, guys, Tidmouth, do you have any last words you would like to say before we wrap this up, being the special guest and all?
Well, I mean, can I plug my Twitter?
Of course.
Of course you can plug your Twitter.
Yeah, well, it's at TidmouthYard, one word.
There will be a link
the actual title of it is TidmouthYard Tubes.
We'll have TidmouthYard will have his YouTube channel and Twitter in the description below, as well as Haddon's and probably Rails to Sheffield, now that we've mentioned them too. But either way, guys, this has been Around the Water Tower, episode 3, where we have discussed Hornby and Bachmann with our special guests. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope you